As we had heard earlier, the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent had said, quote, a very substantial framework was established with Chinese trade negotiators in Malaysia over the weekend. It comes ahead of a meeting between President Trump and Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping. Joining me to discuss is Dr. Keith Naughton, co-founder and principal with the Silent Majority Strategies. Keith, thank you for joining us. As we had just discussed, Bessent signaled that there was a breakthrough in the framework that they lined up with the Chinese across the board on open issues to avoid the rare earth export pause and the 100% incremental tariffs from the U.S. on the Chinese side. What are your thoughts on this breakthrough in the framework discussed?
Well, I think it's helpful. I think the key thing to understand, and hopefully the administration, I think they're beginning to understand this, is that you really can't trust anything that Xi signs or that the CCP signs. The key thing is to have leverage over them. If you don't have leverage, they'll break any deal to further their own interests. The president thought he had a deal on rare earths months ago. Of course, when Xi and the CCP thought they could get some advantage over breaking it, they did so. So I think it's very key for the U.S. to maintain some type of leverage point in order to keep these deals in force, because if they don't, the Chinese will find some way around it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, and I'd like to explore that a level deeper. So the opaqueness, of course, of the communist regime system makes it really hard to know who's in charge and by what sets of procedures they're even operating, where, of course, all westernized democracies have open elections at all of the various levels of government. For example, we reported on the death of Xi's two closest allies, one by heart attack and another by suicide. So what are your thoughts on dealing with a regime of this nature?
Well, back in the Cold War, the United States was always trying to figure out what was happening in the Soviet Union. You know, they called it Kremlinology. I don't know what you would call it with China, but we never seemed to really figure out exactly what was going on in that country. It was hard to figure out exactly what was going on in China when it was much more closed. So I think it's hard to figure out. There have been a lot of purges of the military. There have been a lot of purges of senior staff. We don't really know who is completely in charge. We don't really know exactly which power centers are on top at any particular moment of time. So it is very much a challenge. That makes it hard to plot out policy. And when they change their mind on deals all the time based on their interest, that's a challenge too. So what I think the president needs to do is be very strong on American interests, on making the United States and other allied countries independent of what the CCP is doing. So I think these deals with Malaysia and Thailand are very smart because these are two very nationalist countries. They're quite independent. I think it's telling that Thailand and Cambodia had the United States mediate their dispute. That has to be humiliating for the CCP, that these countries in their backyard were in this serious conflict and Xi couldn't do anything about it. Why would they go to him? They can't trust him.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point. And of course, we pride ourselves having our founding language edition was Chinese. And some of the things that we've reported on were, of course, everybody knows Xi is the first since Mao to go beyond a 10-year term. He sort of, it seemed like, had appointed himself ruler for life, but then he potentially had a stroke. And then we see somewhat of after he purged Hu very publicly in front of all to see, the entire world, now potentially Hu's faction is gaining some momentum, and we see this potentially with Xi losing power. But of course, we can't decouple overnight, as we just saw with the rare earths and the need for market access for our farmers' soybeans. So how must these realities be balanced, knowing that we do rely on China?
Well, I think we've got to find ways where we've got pressure points on them, where the United States and like-minded countries have built mutual support, because China can't operate independently. They import a lot of oil, they import a lot of resources, they import a lot of fuel, they still import a great deal of manufactured products, key manufactured products. They're racing to their own level of independence. So I think both sides are sort of working towards independence of each other. it would be mutually beneficial if it could have a consistent trade relationship, but that just can't happen with the CCP in charge and with this very nationalist attitude or ultra-nationalist attitude that they have, an aggressive attitude. So I think it's a matter of building a coalition, working towards independence where possible, while continuing to trade where it is to the benefit of these countries outside of China.
Yeah, you've mentioned the importance of having that sort of sphere of influence over in Asia. Trump had said he's going to directly bring up human rights. Jimmy Lai, who of course is the imprisoned publisher from Hong Kong, as well as Taiwan. Do you see that as part of really just negotiating and leverage on the things that he's hoping to get? Or do you think that there's a window of opportunity on any one of those things, human rights, Jimmy Lai, and Taiwan?
Well, I think that's a pain point for the Chinese. So I think it's a good negotiating point. But for the internal politics that goes on in China and the organization of the society, I don't think the CCP and Xi and his allies are going to change anything. I think it's really leverage to get a better deal. I think Trump's got to be strong, though, on Taiwan, because you have to be very careful about the sort of stealth aggression, or it's not, I guess it's not that stealth. You have to be concerned about them blockading the country. You've got to be concerned about them using alternate means other than a direct invasion to really pressure and cripple a country. So I think it's a very tricky issue. I don't think you're going to make much progress in human rights in China because it's just the antithesis of Marxism and the CCP's philosophy.
Now, I want to turn our attentions to how Trump may be able to use this meeting with Xi to create any kind of progress on Russia, and just to get your general views on, you know, how that situation can find some sort of a breakthrough.
Well, I think that China is obviously supporting Russia, I think in many cases because it's in opposition to the United States. That's a lot of what they do. I think they view this war as weakening both Russia, who they are not really allies with. I think they look at Russia as a former exploitative country. They look at Russia as having illegally occupied and stolen what China would call Outer Manchuria and Russia would call their Far East. So there's a lot of grievances there. So I think it's kind of a false friendship. So I don't think they mind profiting off of the war and Russia and what they view as the West as being weakened by this war. So I don't think they've got a lot of incentive to end it. When in fact, I think the larger point is that it's hurting the world economy, it's promoting inflation, it has the potential to spread more conflict, and that's really not in China's long-term interest, but I don't think they really see that. So I don't think they'll be a very useful interlocutor. I mean, I think they could stop this war if they cut off Russia right now, but I don't think they really want to. What was that old line from Lenin, the worse, the better? I think they've kind of adopted that as their policy. So I think there's going to be a real challenge. I think the United States, what it needs to do is support Ukraine, increase the pressure on Russia, I think get to the point where it's intolerable, where they have to come to the negotiating table. Historically, that's the only time Russia's come to the negotiating table, when they felt it's just intolerable to continue the war.
That's a fascinating interpretation. I always thought they were unified in their front, but you're actually suggesting, rightfully with your explanation, that they have some past grievances and they actually see it as good for Russia to sort of deplete its own stability and resources. Fascinating. Appreciate your perspectives this morning, Dr. Keith Naughton. Great to speak with you.
Thank you.